Adam from Loose Pixel, and welcome back. Now, I want to start today with a quote I've heard probably 5,000 times, and that's not an exaggeration, of course. And the quote is, "Life imitates art." I've heard it from actors, I've heard it from singers, musicians, painters, photographers, cinematographers, you name it. And although I always found it poetic and it glorified my position on this planet as an artiste, it didn't really resonate with me in any which way, shape, or form. I didn't really give it much thought. It wasn't until much later in my life, when I had more experiences, life experiences, I had more professional artistic experiences, that I started to realize the meaning behind that. That the more I learn about art, the more I learn about life, and vice versa. And furthermore, how I use each of these two different facets of my life to feed each other. That both of these facets of my life have grown considerably based on the intermingling of these different understandings. And there's one in particular today that I want to share with you. One that I teach my students pretty much on day one of our mentorship together. It's an overlying philosophy, and it's probably one of the most important things that I can teach, because it doesn't only help us artistically, it helps us psychologically. And as we know on this channel, one of the biggest obstacles that us artists have to navigate around is not the technical, it's the psychological, it's the personal. In fact, I would argue that technical things are a lot easier to tackle because there's a problem and there's a way to solve it. Whereas psychological plays deeper into our DNA. It's something that forces us to have to tackle our egos. It's something that it forces us to reflect on ourselves on a more personal level very often and get to the core of why certain emotional obstacles get in the way behind our growth. Well, here's the big one. Mastery has nothing to do with your ability to solve complex problems. It has everything to do with your ability to look at complexity and find a way of simplifying it for you. Think about that for a second. Instead of you trying to wrap your mind around the complexity of this world, the complexity of science and light and composition and pose and expression and gesture and atmosphere and geology and everything else that we have to develop intellectually in order to improve our skills artistically. Instead, it's finding a way to make all of these complex things relatable to you on a very fundamental level. What this does is it doesn't only unlock your ability to tackle complex things, it also unlocks your understanding of yourself. Because when we're faced with things that we feel are out of our league, it immediately puts us into category mode. The world requires an artist of this level of skill up there, and I'm only this level of skill down here. So in a sense, you created an echelon, a levels system in your brain, and you're not there yet. And one of the major things that I've learned time and time again throughout my life as a father, as a teacher, as a YouTuber, is the fact that this idea of greater or lesser intellect is false. This understanding we have that the older you get, the smarter you get. The older you get, the wiser you get, I believe is a false understanding of intelligence. Because, in my opinion, intelligence and growth is relative to the world around you. It's for the same reason that psychologists will tell you that children suffer as much stress as adults do. That the stress that they deal with is in direct relation to what they're experiencing at that particular point in their life, that adaptation that they need to make. And when you're at the, quote, beginning of your artistic learning curve, you might think that the struggles, the difficulties, the concepts that you're having a hard time grasping are more, quote, amateur. They're a, quote, lower level than the masters. No, it's just a point in the journey. It's just a point in your life where you have a challenge and you have to face it. I don't feel any more above the act of being an artist than the students who have only been painting for 2 months that I teach. I feel like we both struggle with the same challenges. We're just at different points in our journey. And when it comes to understanding that, and when it comes to understanding yourself and how to go about teaching your brain things, concepts that it was never even aware existed in the first place, you need to find a way to rationalize that in your brain. And that's where this quote comes in. That's where this understanding comes in. It's that you're looking at this big, complicated achievement by some great master artist, and it doesn't make any sense to you. So that in turn makes you feel, quote, incompetent. It makes you feel like you lack the intelligence, lack the ability, lack the, quote, gift that this other artist has. And it's not. That artist is no more capable and no more intelligent than you. Isn't that exactly what Steve Jobs said in one of his inspirational speeches? That everything in the world that you've ever seen created by the human species was created by humans that were no more capable or intelligent than you. They were just at a different point in the process of engineering. They were at a different point in the process of understanding of whatever big feat they were trying to tackle. But they were no more human than you. And that's where the term artistic fundamentals comes in. You probably hear teachers online talk about that all the time. It's crucial that you learn the fundamentals. I hear Borodante say it. I hear Clint Cearley say it. I hear Tyler Edlin say it. And I say it too. What does that actually mean? Does that mean learn the easiest, simplest part of something? Does it mean learn it at its most basic level? It can be interpreted as that. Instead, think of the word fundamentals as understanding something at its core, understanding lighting and value at its core. And I encourage you to watch a video by Tyler Edlin or by Clint Cearley, all videos which I've watched this week, talking about values. And the number one thing that they tell you about values is simplify it. You don't want a big smorgasbord of different scattered values all over the place. It's too complicated. It's too scattered. It's uncontrollable. Versus, once they've done the paint over of it, that all of those values have been simplified into 3 basic structures. And that each one of these 3 basic values that they work with don't infringe on the other. So that your sense of form, your sense of silhouette, your sense of depth, your sense of volume, all work. So that you can look at it as a tiny thumbnail, 1 by 1 inch, aka card art size, and be able to read perfectly what you're saying. Exactly the same thing applies to colors, as it does to composition, as it does to visual storytelling, as it does to set design, as it does to perspective. If something feels too complicated, if something feels too over your head, if it feels too advanced, if it feels too expert for you, I want you to abolish that language and instead replace that with, I haven't yet found a way to simplify it. Honest to goodness, my main focus as an artist, as a teacher, as a YouTuber, as a communicator is not finding ways to wrap my mind around complicated concepts. It's finding ways of taking complicated concepts and stupefying them into the smallest little grain of understanding so that it can fit inside my tiny little brain. That is honestly my focus. I'm not trying to make my brain bigger for the world. I'm trying to make the world smaller for my brain. And as soon as you change that perspective of it, that's where the quote that we started off with, art imitates life. That's where that comes in. Because for the same reason that an artistic concept might feel out of your reach of understanding is for exactly the same reason that life can feel out of your reach too. It's because there's so many problems on this planet. There's so many psychological issues that we're dealing with. There's so many challenges. There's so many adaptations that we have to deal with that you feel overwhelmed trying to keep up with it, trying to keep up with the standards of beauty, trying to keep up with the standards of intelligence, trying to keep up with the standards of employment and income, trying to keep up with the standards of fitness, that all of these responsibilities overwhelm you. And something I told my mother when I was very young, when she was having a very hard time. She was upset, and my 8-year-old wisdom, I said to her, "But Mom, you can't answer 50 questions with one answer." And my mother's reminded me of that quote time and time again, and what a brilliant child I was, doting on me. But it's true. It's funny and ironic how the 8-year-old Adam knew that intuitively, but the 44-year-old Adam had to relearn that time and time again. Life will get overwhelming. Growth will become overwhelming. And when it does, your emotions will also start to overwhelm you. You're going to start to feel like you can't keep up with the race. And when that happens, I want you to purge your brain of all of these thoughts and responsibilities. And I want you to relax, focus on just one thing, and challenge that. Just one. You cannot master 50,000 different artistic principles, concepts, fundamentals. You can't do that. It's impossible. Yet I imagine you're probably down on yourself because you can't, because somebody else can and you can't. Instead, just focus on one simple concept. One thing. Just make it Anatomy Week. And only think about anatomy. Hell, if that's too much, then just focus on Arm Week. It's going to be 2 weeks of just learning the forearms. 2 weeks of just learning how to draw a hand. 2 weeks of just learning the muscles on your left cheek. Who cares? So long as you're making steady forward growth, you're getting somewhere. And every little seed of information, every little seed of knowledge that you gain throughout this process is forward growth. And I guarantee you, as long as you're growing, you'll feel inspired. Because there's nothing more exciting than knowing that you know something today that an hour ago you didn't. There's something incredibly empowering about that. I make these weekly art talks for exactly the same reason that I teach art. It's because of how fascinated I am with how, no matter how much you think you know, art always has a way of teaching you how to see things that you never saw before. That art literally teaches you how to see. And if you use that analogy in reference to your real life, when you find yourself struggling to think, struggling to comprehend something, struggling to grasp a concept, it's because you're mentally trying to force your brain to think about something in a way it wasn't designed to do. So what you need to do is find a way to adapt that information so that you can. All right? And with that said, of course, I love you all with all my heart, and happy painting. Take care.